Hello YouTube. Just gonna get straight into it. Today's case is about an Irish woman who tried to assassinate Benito Mussolini. When I actually heard about this, because they done a plaque recently, so that's kind of how I found out about it on the news and decided to start looking into it. And it sounds really cool and badass, isn't it? Like, this Irish woman, decides to try kill a dictator. Um, but when you actually discover like her life and stuff, it's actually quite a sad tale. But anyway, we'll just start from the beginning. Violet Albina Gibson was born on the 31st of August 1876. Her parents, Edward and Frances Gibson, were Baron and Lady Ashbourne. So as you can imagine, they weren't lower class. They weren't eating the porridge. Yeah, so her father was like a barrister and all these other things. They lived at 12 Marion Square in Dublin city centre. So she had two sisters and four brothers, and like I said, they were well off. They would have had servants and all that jazz. So as I said, the family were well off. They had, holidays to France and Italy. They attended parties at Buckingham Palace. Violet's love affair with Italy began at 10 years old when she accompanied her father on a trip over there and obviously got to see everything. At 18 years old, the Honourable Violet was a debutante in the court of Queen Victoria. Like I said, they went to like parties and everything in Buckingham Palace. Violet would like regularly be in the social columns of the newspapers and stuff. So one of the wild things were that the family were Protestant. Now, one of the ways you can always kind of know, the rich people in this time would have always been Protestant. The Protestants were richer than Catholics. There's this whole running joke. I first think I came across it on the Ireland Simpsons page on Facebook. It's the whole thing about where do you put your toaster, and the idea was that Catholics have their toaster on like the counter, and that Protestants would have it in a cupboard. And the idea is that Protestants had money, so they had more like space to put it away. They had the luxury of putting their toaster away, whereas Catholics growing up just had it on the counter beside like the kettle or the microwave, whatever. Yeah, so there's a stupid and useless random fact. But anyway, the idea, it would have been like Protestants had the money. Anyway, so they were well off, they were Protestant. And then her mother, Violet's mother, Frances, decided to become a Christian Scientist. So one of the main beliefs for this religion is that like illness and disease are a result of sin. So like you've sinned, like if you're sick, it's because you've sinned. And it turns out that Violet was sick a lot as a child. She had lots of different things wrong with her. So like Violet would have like scarlet fever, rubella, the measles, all these different things. She literally really had no energy as a child. She kind of, one of the sources says she would have been very like energetic in her mind, let's say, in that she wanted to do all these, great things, and that she just couldn't. She had to stay in bed or whatever. And so the way the religion works is they believe like you have to like pray away, the sin or whatever. So if it wasn't bad enough that like this child basically had no childhood in the sense that they had to just, they couldn't just run around and play, like your mother's then telling you that you're a sinner and this is all your fault. Violet was very intelligent and she had an interest in religion and in philosophy. At 21, she became independent from her father by getting an independent income from her father. So obviously back then, the men, like the sons would go off to great colleges and stuff like that, but the daughters would be homeschooled, because they just have to marry essentially. There's no, they don't have to, carve out a career. But that wasn't something Violet wanted to do. So once she gained her independent income, she then began traveling across different places. She became interested in theosophy and, kind of experimented with this. Violet's brother Willie was, I don't know if you'd call it a social worker essentially, but he was into like social justice and stuff like this. So she would join him and they would go around, like different impoverished areas to look after people and help them and stuff like that. So obviously she gained an interest in this area. Willie was already converted to Catholicism at this point, and in 1902, 26-year-old Violet also converted. The family were horrified. What are you gonna do with your toaster? She moved to Chelsea in England and began living a boho lifestyle. She would actually become engaged to an artist who I couldn't find the name of in 1908. And this is kind of where all the tragedy in her life starts. So her brother Harry dies of TB around this time, and the year after becoming engaged, her fiance, the artist, dies suddenly. So Violet started channeling all her, time, energy, grief, sorrow, all of this into religion and into charity work, something she was obviously already familiar with. She then went on to spend some time in Italy, but unfortunately, again, she became ill and had to go home to England. She would go through like bouts of what they consider was the flu, and also the go to answer for the time, hysteria. She would stay at Buckfast Abbey in Devon, and this is where she met Enid Dinas. This was a fellow convert to Catholicism, and she was an author. So the two became quite close and they were friends. Again, more tragedy. In 1913, Violet's father, who she had sadly become estranged from, died after a fall. He had been living in England at the time, and his remains were returned to Dublin and he was buried in Mount Jerome. Violet came home to attend the funeral, but this would be her last trip to Ireland. So around this time, our little friend Benito would be starting to appear on the scene and gaining more power and blah 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 blah. Violet was a pacifist. Her brother Victor, who was actually her closest sibling, had been kidnapped during the Boer War in South Africa. When he returned home, he was severely traumatized, as you can imagine, and so were his family. So Violet became very anti-war and was deeply affected when World War I broke out. So she actually went to France, to Paris, to work with anti-war activists over there. And I did read that Scotland Yard had a file opened on her, for the activities that they were doing. In 1914, Violet was diagnosed with Paget's disease, I'm hoping I'm saying that right, and had to have a mastectomy on the left. Only 2 years later, she had to have more surgery for appendicitis and peritonitis. These would actually then leave her with ongoing pain, so she struggled with this then every day going forward. She spent the next few years of her life in Kensington, and sadly, Violet's life was to take another tragic blow. In 1922, Victor died, one source saying from a mental breakdown. Violet took this very bad. She would go on to spend time in a nursing home after also then suffering a breakdown. When she did return home, there was an incident then. Her housekeeper's daughter found her like wandering on the street outside the home, just crossing. Apparently she was just crossing traffic back and forth and stuff like this. So the daughter, brought her home. And then at some point, so I have to imagine, I'm guessing that they were already back in the home, but somehow Violet then attacked the daughter with a knife and cut her hand. It would be said then that she thought like it was a burglary, or it was a home invasion or something. So I would imagine maybe that she was already back. Maybe she had already gone to a different room or something, and then got if her mind wasn't all in the right, in the right state of mind. If the daughter had gone into a different room or something like that and she heard the noise, then did she, think or something, and that's what happened? Obviously, we don't really know. But after this, Violet was declared insane and went to spend time in Holloway Asylum in Surrey. One source says that there was also another incident here where she tried to attack another inmate. Sorry, inmate's the wrong word. Patient. Sorry, I shouldn't have said inmate. After 6 months here, she was released into the care of her mother and her sister Constance. So as I said, Mussolini was, starting to rise up the ranks in Italy, and Violet started following this very closely. So just a point that at this point, everybody in Italy loves Mussolini. I was actually, again, I was surprised. So I'm a true crime channel. I'm not a history channel. The most I knew about Mussolini was from what I learned in school, which I'll be honest, I wasn't really that interested in. And most recently is because I liked looking at, morbid pictures. And I had come across the picture of Mussolini hanging upside down in the square. That's literally like where my history of Mussolini, my knowledge of Mussolini was. So I was very surprised to learn that people loved him. In the beginning, he was loved, the same as Hitler, I suppose. People liked what they were saying. They liked how they were saying it. They liked their speeches, all of this. So he was like revered in Italy, and he was admired throughout the world by other leaders. On the 10th of June 1924, Giacomo Matteotti, who was the leader of the United Socialist Party, so obviously they were against, the fascist party that was Mussolini's, and so he was his biggest rival and the most outspoken against Mussolini. So on the 10th, he was on his way to Parliament when he was abducted. A fascist squad bundled him into a car and took him to the woods. Here, he was beaten, stabbed, sexually assaulted, and left to die in a ditch. This horrified Italians and really, really affected Violet. But can I point out, it horrified Italians who then continued to love Mussolini. In November 1924, Violet hires like a nurse as a companion, Mary McGrath. She was actually from Ireland, Mary, of course, and they travel to Rome. So I don't know, obviously it was just kind of taking it was like this nice little trip to Rome for the girls. They stayed at Our Lady of Lourdes convent, and Violet would spend time with socialists in Rome who opposed Mussolini. On the 27th of February 1925, Violet was alone in her room praying when she took out a gun and shot herself in the chest. It's believed she brought the gun to Italy. Fortunately, the bullet, there's kind of different sources, it went in above the heart anyway, so it went into kind of the shoulder, and so some sources say that it kind of got stuck in there somewhere, and others say that it went through, kind of right out through the back. But either way, she survived. The nuns burst through and found her, and like that, she was still alive. They called a doctor. After this incident, her family demanded that she come home, but she refused because obviously she knew they were just going to commit her again. So she voluntarily checked herself in to Villa Gispinina, which was a clinic in Rome. She then received care, obviously, for, the wound and stuff, and then also for her mental health. One source says that the gun was then confiscated by police, which you would probably assume it would be. Mary, the nurse/companion, would visit her often, and after a couple of months, she was allowed to leave, and they went to stay in the Santa Brigada convent. The next while was quiet enough, and Violet was just following the events of Mussolini, who at this point is in his early dictatorship. In March 1926, she fired Mary, sending her home to Ireland. The same month, her mother Frances died. On April 7th, 1926, Violet made her way to the Palazzo dei Conservatori. Mussolini was here making a speech at the International Conference of Surgeons. She joined the huge crowd there in the square who were, obviously cheering for him, waiting to see him. And as they cheered, 49-year-old, little 5'1" Violet with the grey, straggly hair pushed her way through to get a good spot. And as Mussolini made his way to the car, Violet stretched out her hand holding the revolver and shot at Mussolini point blank. Just as she fired, a group of students had begun singing like the fascist national anthem or something, and Mussolini turned his head. So the bullet whizzed past his nose, burning his cheeks and just catching his nose. He fell back, grabbed his hands up to his nose, blood was pouring down, and he looked across and saw little Violet, shocked to see this little woman responsible. Violet fired again, but the gun jammed, and while Mussolini was swept away, the angry crowds descended on Violet. They would rip her clothes, throw punches, rip out her hair, and then the police made their way in and saved her. She would later say in a letter that in that moment, she just closed her eyes and felt serene. This feeling just came over her. She was arrested and taken to Mantelate prison. Here, she was fingerprinted and her mugshot was taken. So obviously the detectives just couldn't believe that this little frail old woman had done what she done, and then, that she could have acted alone. And so Violet messed with them. Firstly, she would just pretend like that she didn't know what they were on about, when they were like, you shot Mussolini, you shot at Mussolini. you know, like, me? I shot him, was it? You know, like, played just like that she was forgetful, or, you know, just couldn't remember or didn't know what was going on. And then eventually she did admit to doing it, but she gave different reasons for doing it. She would never say anybody had also been involved, although there's obviously speculation as to where she got the gun. In one thing, I think she said 4 people knew or were aware of the plan or something like that. And then she would say things about, like, you know, like the voices, not necessarily, I think, the voices in her head, but that, like, you know, like God was telling her, you know, that she needed to do this. In a letter, Violet would say that her Irish tongue got her out of situations. Of course, Mussolini appeared later that day, just with a little bandage over his nose, you know, to show how strong he was. And, you know, he made a disgrace speech. And then get this, now I'm going to read it. Firstly, Pope Pius sent a cardinal to him to tell him that he had been protected by God. King George, the president of the US, France, Germany, all sent good words. The Irish Times reported that Cosgrave sent his best wishes. Violet didn't care about her reputation, you know, she didn't care how she was coming across. But obviously her family did, and the British government did. And so her family and the British Foreign Office, you know, put in like an insanity plea. A psychiatric report would show that she suffered from chronic paranoia. And finally, Benito Mussolini ordered for her to be deported back to England. The British government thanked him for this. So the lawyers made it seem to Violet like that she was going to be set free, that like she had been deported and had served whatever little bit of time, so that was it. She was going home. Her sister Constance had come together, and as they got onto the train, they had undercover police officers with them. From what I gather, like, Violet didn't know this, Constance, I'm assuming, did, and then there was also some hospital workers. So when they arrived to Victoria Station, she was not brought to, you know, the family home. She was then brought to St Andrew's Hospital in Northampton. And it was here that she realised she was being committed. The family sent a thank you note to Mussolini. Over the many, many years, she would make repeated pleas to be released. All were ignored. She would die on the 2nd of May, 1956. So to add to her sad life, it appears that there was a documentary done. So basically when they go to the hospital and they're going through stuff, there are letters found that she had like written to you know, her sisters and to her Enid and stuff like this, and none of them had been sent. They were all still there, you know, and they were obviously asking for help or asking for this, for that, or whatever, or just to talk. Like, that's enough to drive someone mad. She had also sent letters to Winston Churchill, and she had sent letters to Princess Elizabeth, who obviously would go on to become queen. But again, these were never sent. So as I said, I don't know a lot about Mussolini, and obviously I looked up some stuff for this video. So obviously he was in his own right a bad person, and then obviously when Hitler also came into power, I read something that was like Mussolini was like, oh, I can't remember the word, but basically as in he was an opportunist essentially, as in he would have sided with Hitler or the Allies depending on who was the one who, you know, he thought would definitely win, or, you know, who could give him more, this type of thing. So like, it's even said that he wasn't necessarily anti-Semitic, but that he sided with Hitler, and so Hitler was doing this, so then he ordered, you know, for the Jewish people of Italy to be sent to concentration camps and stuff like this. So obviously then after World War II was lost by Germany and Italy, yeah, as I said earlier, essentially then Mussolini was caught with one of his mistresses and other fascists, and they were executed. And then their bodies were hung up in a square, and, you know, like people came and obviously like threw stones at them and jeered and all this stuff, and it was obviously supposed to kind of send a message to any of the remaining fascists that you're done. This happened obviously in 1945. So for another 11 years, Violet was in that asylum being told like she was insane. So I'm actually going to read a little quote from the documentary. Was done by Siobhan Lynham and Barry Dowdall. And basically Barry Dowdall says, Violet Gibson was someone who was very brave to do what she did. And between her and Benito Mussolini and all the things he did, who was really mad? As I said, only recently, the plaque has been put up outside 12 Marion Square to, commemorate her birthplace and stuff like that. Because essentially, Violet Gibson was forgotten about. There was 4 assassination attempts on Mussolini, I believe. And again, to be honest, I didn't really know about any of them. But I should know about her. I should know about her because firstly, she was a woman, up the women, and she was Irish, up the Irish. Yeah, like she came from a huge world of privilege and stuff. She didn't need to do. She could have just sat back and, lived in her little bubble and not care about what was happening in Italy and not caring about all this stuff. But she knew, this man was evil. And obviously we're talking about a different time. But obviously maybe even if she did have, problems, she didn't need to be locked away. Problems can be solved without just throwing the person in a room and just ignoring the problem, then burying your head in the sand. So I'm glad the plaque was done up, obviously for people to know about, and then also because it made me learn about this, and now hopefully in turn it will make you have learned about this. So yeah, that is the story of badass Violet Gibson, who shows you're never too old to follow your dreams. No, that's a joke. So I apologise for not being around. I feel like we're going to start having trust issues between us. Yeah. Do you know, I don't even know what to say. Like, at the start of this video, I was like, hurry, get recording before the baby wakes up. Because, yeah, life is very unpredictable. All my extra time that used to go on doing the YouTube as like a hobby or whatever is gone, essentially, for the most part. So I'm just moaning now. Yeah, no, so I'm going to do this, and then I actually have like some shorts videos to do, kind of. I'm not really sure what way I'm going to do it yet, but there'll be 2 videos out this week anyway. And also, let me know what you're thinking about like the shorts, because I wasn't able to focus as much on this. See, the thing is as well, the research takes a lot of time. Like, if there's books or documentaries and news articles and stuff, I've said it before, like, I want to read all them. I don't want to just kind of like reading a Wikipedia page and then just kind of like reading it back. Like, I want to be really learning it myself, and then obviously telling you. So I've lost my train of thought. So yeah, that was it. The mini videos that I started doing, like, they were kind of like that because they didn't take a lot of time, and I was hoping that was something to kind of engage with you guys about. So now I'm actually kind of happy that I finally figured out what shorts are. Took me a while because I attempted to use TikTok before, because people say TikTok is used for the true crime. But I asked all the cool kids that I know who use it, i.e. my nephews, and they either pretended they didn't know because they didn't want to help me, or they just didn't know how to do it. So then someone suggested about the shorts, and I was like, I haven't got a clue. And then someone kind of helped me a bit, and then I just had to learn myself. So yeah, let me know what you think about them. Would you like to just keep seeing kind of little snippets? I was thinking like that, just these little bits, like the books, just a little bit like that, if you'd like to see things like that. Or would you rather be like, no, just do content when you can? Anyway, let me know. Yeah, I really think I just rambled there for the last 3 minutes or something. I feel like I should start plugging like social medias and stuff, even though I don't really post on them, I suppose, because there's not a lot of followers. But I suppose if you had followers, then maybe you'd post more. So maybe it's like a thing we have to do together, a catch-22 that we have to solve together. So yeah, Instagram and Facebook is Dark Vaults, but obviously the YouTube is the main thing. So if you haven't already and you want to see more of the videos, please subscribe, please like the video. I'm not very good at this whole promo part. If there is someone you know who likes dark crime, I was going to say true crime, and you don't think that they've known about my channel yet, maybe you could suggest it to them. That's like the best thing you could do for me. Yeah, cheers, thanks. We're going to say goodbye now. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think of Violet. Let me know what you think of the whole case, what you think of the video. I think I kind of like just having the boring background, but let me know if you do prefer to have like the bits in the back and stuff like that. Yeah, anyway, thank you for watching. Gorv Mila Mahagut, and yeah, bye, Slán.